Hi everyone, welcome to another podcast from the Jewish Stand. I am Shmuel, your host. I am the co-founder and director of the Jewish Stand, and I'm delighted to invite Josh Rose to talk to us today. Josh is a featured writer on the Jewish Stand. He originally is from Manchester, he currently lives in North London. He has written for the Jewish Chronicle, Jewish News, and the Jewish Telegraph, and like I've said, the Jewish Stand. If you haven't yet checked out his articles, please do. Excellent articles, one after another. You can find them on thejewishstand.com. His debut short film, Cinnamon, was featured in 6 film festivals, including the BAFTA-accredited UK Jewish Film Festival. And you can check out more of his content, not only on the Jewish Stand, but also on Instagram at Josh Rose Writes. Josh, thank you so much for joining. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you, not only your articles and your written voice, but your actual voice on this podcast. And we're going to be covering a lot of topics today, and they're all going to be super interesting, so make sure you tune in until the very end. And don't forget to subscribe to the Jewish Stand's podcast series, where we will be talking more and discussing with more young people, younger Jews, about the topics that we care about today. First off question, just for a bit of context, a bit of background for our listeners who haven't yet read your articles, and again, please read them. But just for those, could you tell us about your background and your experiences?
Yes, so I am from Manchester, like you said, but I've lived in London for the past 8 years. I have written to various things, like you said, a short film, and written for the papers. And yeah, I really enjoyed doing that. In my day job, I've worked for charities and in sort of social responsibility, environmental management, sort of social impact sides of businesses. So wanting to sort of do nice things for the world and for society. My writing's always been about either being Jewish or being gay and Jewish. Pre-October 7th, it was mostly about being gay, I would say, like coming out. I spoke a lot about being gay, did a lot of gay activism. My film was about these 2 gay Jewish young guys, and it was about sort of their struggle of being gay and religious. Post October 7th, slightly changed. I think my voice has been much more about anti-Semitism and my Jewish identity, and I've written a lot about that, and it's been great. And I recently, in the past year, decided to create an Instagram account, having been quite averse to social media. But it's been really great because I've had lots of amazing messages from people, and been able to write for the papers because of this Instagram account, and found people like-minded people, which has been amazing. So I write as much as I can about whatever's happening in the world, and it tends to be focused on anti-Semitism or like Jewish joy. I try and also speak up about Jewish joy because there's a lot of negativity in the world, and I try and speak a bit more about like the joys of being Jewish. There's so much joy in being Jewish, being part of this very small family. I'm just a nice Jewish boy from Manchester, That's it.
Yeah, well, you say yourself so humbly, but there's more to it, because in your articles you do extensively talk about your experiences, not only being gay in the Jewish community, but then also what happens after the 7th of October, who you thought your friends were, and then who you found out your real friends were to be. Could you tell us a bit more about what happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think most Jewish people found out sort of who their friends and supporters were post October 7th. I think for gay Jews, unfortunately, for some reason in the LGBT community, on the whole, it seems to be that they are just super massively pro-Palestinian, to the extent where they have just sort of exiled all Jewish people. I personally, I had quite a few close friends in the gay community, and I lost them throughout post October 7th. One of them on October 8th, the next day, he just sort of exiled me from the group. And then another one who I was much closer with, and it was a lot harder actually to let go of him. We sort of struggled as the months went by, back and forth all the time, arguing back and forth, until we eventually decided we can't continue doing this. And I haven't spoken about it in detail because I don't know if it's controversial to talk about, but I guess I can say what infuriates me and frustrates me a little bit, upsets me, is these 2 friends in particular. One of them came from Western Sahara, and him I met in a sort of support group for people from religious backgrounds who are gay or under the queer umbrella. He came from Western Sahara seeking asylum from his family, who he said were a risk to his life. And we sort of befriended him and, helped him seeking asylum and like, gave him, like, set him up with his life in London. To have him, like, immediately just, like, on October 8th be like, hey, free Palestine, bye. Like, he told me I didn't know much about, like, the history of Western Sahara and Morocco, and he took me to events on about Western Sahara, and always there were, like, Palestinian flags, and I always felt a bit uncomfortable. He said to me, when we went to these events, don't tell anyone that we're gay. Don't tell anyone how we met. Don't tell anyone that you're Jewish. Like, I had to go back in the closet twice to support him, but I still did. Yet, on October 8th, he was like, okay, bye. And I haven't spoken to him since. And then another friend, my other friend who I was much closer with, he came from Yemen, again, seeking asylum, from a war-torn country. We haven't spoken for a while because we just couldn't see eye to eye. And I actually remember asking him, towards the end, I said, you are from Yemen. Your country is at war. Like, I have never heard you one single time speak about Yemen or what's happening in Yemen. You speak about Palestine all the time. Why don't you use your voice to talk about what's happening in your country? You haven't been able to visit your mum in like 5 years. Why don't you talk about Yemen? Like, it's just so weird to me that, like, you have such passion for a situation that you don't actually have any personal connection to, yet your literal homeland you don't talk about. He gave me sort of a wishy-washy answer about how it's like the eternal struggle for for his people, whatever. But it's something I couldn't fathom, and it was a great loss, like, friendship-wise. And so those are my two gay friends that I lost. But I think the gay community in general just sort of have exiled the Jews. But at the same time, sorry, this is very waffly. At the same time, the Jewish community, the gay Jewish community, especially in London, has really come together and made an amazing group. In a way, it's like, this is so much better. I was quite big on, like, the activism scene. I would be at, like, trans pride or, like, conversion therapy protests. There was always an undercurrent of, like, anti-Semitism there that you sort of felt or saw explicitly. So it's just nicer to be in a place where you can be gay and Jewish and be like, this is it. I don't have to compromise myself in any way.
It's really encouraging to hear that, throughout this exile that you've experienced. It's like another Jewish expulsion to add to the list. Right? You found the community welcomes you back with open arms, embraces you, and this isn't a community that you need to hide yourself, and it's so encouraging to hear. I saw one of your Instagram posts where you talk about how the Jewish community have matured or grown up, I think was what you used, something like that, in terms of how it approaches LGBT, and I think it's a much more a respectable approach, which is a very positive direction. I think we can all agree on that. And yet, talking about that expulsion, it kind of just boggles my mind, because we always hear about how these privileged, Western, liberal, you can use all these terms, they don't understand what's going on in that conflict. That's like the average student protest that I experienced when I was in university. They don't know anything about it, and they see what's on the news. But this is something else. This is deeper. These are people who are actively protesting for a group, Hamas. It's, when it comes down to it, they might not do it explicitly, but they are doing it implicitly. Hamas, and like, what do they know what Hamas thinks about LGBT? Do they know what Hamas does to LGBT in Gaza? And they know that this is what they want to do for the whole of what they call Palestine, if they could take control over it. Like, this is more going against your own safety. And you experienced that. You saw that. How do you see them? How do you explain that?
You can't explain it. Like, I've tried, and you can't, like, there's only so many times you can try and have, like, a rational conversation with irrational people. Like, until you drive yourself mad. And I've tried to have this conversation, and it's difficult. It's like trying to fit, like, a circle into a square. Like, it's not possible. Like, it's not possible to explain to people. They can say to me, I don't have to agree with their ideology to support them, which is true. Absolutely, you don't have to, like, nobody here wants any Palestinians to die just because they don't support gay people. Fine. I mean, I personally prioritize people who do support my right to exist. Like, sorry if that's, like, a crazy thing to say, but, like, I do prioritize that. I still don't want anybody else to ever die. I think that we got to this point now where, like, if people are against your viewpoint, they think you deserve to die. I think that's an insane place where we are, and that these people aren't differentiating between Palestinians and Hamas. So that argument is invalid. When I'm talking to these people, I'm not talking about Palestinians, I'm talking about Hamas terrorists. These Hamas terrorists are going to throw you off a building for being gay, for being trans, for being non-binary. And you can't have a conversation with these people because that's logic and just like basic truth. And these people can't comprehend that. They don't want to hear it. So like, what's the point? Like, why waste energy? I just don't bother anymore. I don't. Unless I can like try and find some like humor and like make some funny video out of it, then I'll try. But if they're like genuinely brain dead, then like what's the point?
Yeah, you see these people all the time, especially online. I remember opening a Twitter and like, okay, who should I find to argue for Israel online? And you see a lot of very, very stupid comments by someone who has zero awareness of what's going on in Israel, but yet has a very loud voice. Right, you can't help but imagine what would happen if you went to visit those places, if you went to visit Ramallah, if you went to visit Gaza City, right? If Hamas took over, they would not be safer. They would not live in a safer world at all. And yet they still support it. So you can understand it's not a rational thing. It's not a logical thing, like you said, but it's definitely something beyond what we can explain rationally. I'm sure there's a lot more to discuss in this topic, but I just want to move on to our next question also. You have a Jewish identity that's now becoming stronger and you're becoming more proud of it. And you also have a gay identity that's part of you and who you are. What do you feel about your representation in British society and also in British politics in general? Does that even exist in the UK today?
Gay and Jewish in British politics is Zach Polanski, and my goodness, there isn't a person in the world who could be representing me the least in British politics or just in life. So no, he does. I don't feel like gay and Jewish is represented well in British politics. I think, to be honest, the gay side of me, I feel as though that fight is being fought by the gay community, which is much bigger and stronger and louder than the Jewish community. So I feel like I don't need to be part of that voice. Like they're fine. Like our gay rights are hopefully not going anywhere anytime soon. Like we're doing just fine. I know that there's lots of scaremongering going on, but it seems fine for now. And I'm not getting involved in all the other like anti-Semitism and Jew hate within the gay community. It's just not worth me getting involved. I've already had my run-ins with Peter Tatchell over the past week. I'm just not getting involved. Like the gay community can handle themselves, and great, I can lead them to it. The Jewish community, I think we used to have better representation. I think it's dwindling. I follow Dov Foreman, as most people do, I'm sure, and he put some stat about how like the amount of schools, for example, who are marking Holocaust Memorial Day is like halved or something after October 7th, and I think it's a sad state of affairs. Like the way that we are being represented in media and in politics is definitely worsening, but I do think that we need to be careful about like sometimes we do get a bit like gloomy and doomy about the state of things. And listen, I'm leaving the country because, well, for many reasons, but one of them is because I just don't feel like the UK is safe for Jewish people anymore. But I have to also say, like, I'm not an extremist. I am a rational, normal, reasonable person. Holocaust survivors did meet with Keir Starmer at Holocaust Memorial Day. That is still a thing that we shouldn't really take for granted. It's not a given. So we still should be grateful for that, and like some good things are still happening, but it could be better. Keir Starmer could also not be rolling out the red carpet, for terrorists who publicly state that they want to kill Zionists and police officers, and he could be not recognizing a Palestinian state while Hamas is still holding terrorists. So, there's always room for improvements, but I'm not like catastrophize. I don't think it's helpful to catastrophize all the time, especially like on Instagram and TikTok, and people like really love to make it seem a lot worse than it is. But at the same time, I think it has been better than it is now, and it could be a lot better.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, a lot of people do feel like they're being left behind in Jewish politics. This is a question that we'll get onto soon. Like you say, Zach Polanski, who makes himself a very prominent Jewish voice, but doesn't seem to represent any part of the community. But there are also the mainstream politics, Labour and Conservatives. What are they doing? Reform now on the scene. What is going to happen? There's a lot of uncertainty. And how do we feel about it as Jews? And if I had Phil Rosenberg, the president of the board of deputies, he'll be telling you how the Jewish community's got a lot of friends in high places, but there also seems to be a lot of uncertainty because of the other side of things, like the Palestinian recognition, which immediately after there was a terrorist attack in Manchester, and a lot of people thought was directly connected. It definitely feels like that, and also from the outside, people in Israel, whenever they talk, my friends talk to me, it's like, how's it going in the UK? Everything's bad. You've got anti-Semitic people running for MPs. Do you feel like this in the streets?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it does feel like that. I mean, to have like all the Michigas with the West Midlands police, and there's currently a guy in Birmingham who's running for election who's literally a convicted terrorist. I mean, that's again not really much to do with Jewish representation, just to do with like logic and like how have we got to the point where in the country where like that's allowed. It does feel a bit like, oh my, like what is going to be like the breaking point where people decide like, oh, this is not okay. Like it just doesn't feel civilized anymore.
There's also a point to make about British society as well. It's not just our politicians and our MPs. How is our media treating the Jews? How is our TVs treating the Jews? We used to have I just had a conversation with my colleague in work, and he told me how he was excited to see Friday Night Dinner. He's not Jewish, and he feels like he knows a lot about it. But we don't see that on TV anymore, do we? We don't see positive representation of British culture. How do you think that impacts us?
I'm speaking on behalf of me. I really feel as though, because I really ingest like podcasts and like interviews and stuff, where I really feel as though over the past year, everyone from like A-list Hollywood Jewish celebrities to like just high profile Jews like in the UK who like are currently on the podcast round are really letting me down in terms of how they're representing us, or at least me. So I'm raised modern Orthodox in the UK, which I know that means different things to different like in America, but like modern Orthodox, so like Jewish nursery, Jewish primary school, Jewish secondary school. Went to shul every week, and well, until I was bar mitzvah, then it maybe dwindled a bit. Went to Bnei Akiva, went to Israel on tour and Aish and all the things. Like live in London, only live in northwest London, around the Jewish areas. Like go to Jewish events, and we do Friday night dinners once a month. Like we are immersed in the Jewish community. My friends send their kids to Jewish schools, although don't really want to anymore, and that's a whole other conversation. Like we are Jewish in a way that like we are immersed in the community. I'm not saying that that's the right or wrong way to be Jewish, but that's how we are. And I feel as though these high profile Jews who are doing interviews or podcasts are either not saying anything about the Jewish experience, saying the total wrong thing about the Jewish experience, or are saying things that makes me feel like they just are totally removed from the Jewish experience that at least I live. And I found it so frustrating. To like big things where they're like saying, insane things where that like literally puts us in like physical danger as Jewish people. They're like, as a Jew, I think and people should be allowed to protest outside synagogues. Well, no, that's not okay. Or they're saying small things like let's say they don't live in Jewish areas, but you're not living in the places where like Jews are harassed every day and attacked, and you're just not living the experience. So like they've got a platform there on the microphone speaking, and people, Jews and non-Jews, are listening. And I just feel like the opportunity is so missed for them to just say something or the right thing, except for the Nisht for Me podcast, which I'm actually going on hopefully in a couple of weeks. Like they are great because they are like Manchester Jewish. Like they live like that's why I love it, because they are actually like experiencing the Judaism that at least I live. And again, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way, but like that's the experience of my Judaism that everyone in my circle experiences, and we're the ones who it seems are like being attacked all the time by like the the nutcases. So yeah, it seems like that representation has been that's what's been bothering me more so than like your Friday night dinners, which aren't being made anymore. Like that is it's sad. But I think like the Jews who are doing interviews, I think that they are really letting us down massively.
What should we be saying, really? I mean, like you've said, it's, we're a very positive religion, right? What is our message when we come to these podcasts and come to these public events and there's a Jew there?
Talk about, the joys of being Jewish, the communities, the positive things that we do. But then I also think acknowledge what's going on to Jewish people as well. Like I think these people don't live in Jewish communities. They aren't going to shul. They aren't sending their kids to Jewish school, so they don't see, they aren't making comments. I made a video about the fact that outside our shul we have these massive bollards now disguised as flower pots to stop cars ramming into us whilst we walk to shul, which are new from this week. They didn't used to be there. Now they're there. Like, it would be nice if we had a high-profile Jew talking about how that's a terrible thing to have. I mean, fantastic that that the council have allowed that to happen. I mean, the shul's got to pay for it themselves, but like the council's allowed it. But why do we have to even have that? Like, it'd be good if we had someone speaking out on behalf of us saying like, it's because of a series of failures from the government and the police and the CPS and society as a whole that this has been allowed to happen. But like, no Jews who are part of this community in Manchester are famous enough to be going on these podcasts to talk about it. The Jews who are famous enough to go on these podcasts, they live out in the sticks, nowhere near any Jews. So it's like there's just a disconnect, and it feels so frustrating that like they just don't have the lived experience to speak on behalf of us, and I just find that really frustrating.
How do you explain to someone who has no indication of this, right? Like we said about BBC shows, there is no show out there that shows what it's like being Jewish, right? And going to shul on a Friday night or Shabbat morning, and there's a security man standing outside these huge gates, and you can't go in, right, unless you can prove your identity, unless you're known in the community. And there's such strict security, right? But we have our own CST, right, who do amazing work, and there's a lot to be said about that as well. And that's essentially our own sort of community police force, because our police aren't able to protect us in that way. That's sometimes what these are what the messages that come out with, but no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to put it publicly, because then it kind of puts us in a place that, one, we're doing well by ourselves because we seem to be protecting ourselves. We've got CSD, we've got bollards, that's great, but it shouldn't be like that. That's not right. And how do you explain that to someone who's not heard this? He's just heard the Jew who's talking about how they stand up for Palestine and they stand and we just need to get together in a room with people and talk about it. That's what I had in one of my meetings in university, where they said all we need to do is just put you guys in a room, sit together, that happens, and you talk it out and things get better. In your one of your articles, you wrote about the Oscars, and you put a lot of focus about Hollywood stars singling out Israel, right? Again, out of all the countries that they could single out of all the conflicts, it's usually Israel that gets singled out. What is their impact on our society, and where is it all coming from?
Yeah. So I wrote the article because I think it was last year's Oscars. They all had like the ceasefire pin, which was like the bloody red hands, which I just find so frustrating, because if Jews run Hollywood, like, who is telling these people to do this? I want to sit Billie Eilish and Ava DuVernay and all these different people down and say to them, like, do you know what these hands represent? Like, I want to tell them the story of these two guys who took a wrong turning into the West Bank and were ripped apart limb by limb, and their blood on the hands of Palestinians who ripped them apart in the most vicious, disgusting way is now like a sign of ceasefire. Again, it's like it's going back to the conversation before. Like, logic, it doesn't come into this conversation. And I think with this year's Oscars, like with Billie Eilish, like with the "No one is illegal on stolen land," well, I think people are getting sick of like the virtue signaling, and I think Ricky Gervais was famous for saying, like, keep your politics out of it. I think people are getting tired, like, of celebrities talking on behalf of, like, quote unquote normal people, because they are just so out of touch. Um, I made a video a few weeks ago because there's this singer Zara Larsson who put, like, on her Instagram story, she loves, like, socialism, and she loves criminals and all this ridiculous stuff, and I'm like, I don't know anything about her, I don't know where she lives, but I'm assuming she lives in, like, a gated mansion where criminals can't get in, and I'm assuming she gets paid a lot more than, like, her bus driver and her crew members. I mean, that's not socialism. Like, it's the hypocrisy that people are getting really sick of. And just the fact that they don't have the information, like how many open letters or is Olivia Colman going to sign to release like a Palestinian terrorist? Like, I want to sit Olivia Colman down and say to her, like, are you reading the background of these people? Like, did you know that this guy killed like 4 Israelis? Like, or are you just signing it because it says the word Palestinian? Like, is an Israeli life so invaluable, like, to you that you don't care? Like, I just want to ask these people, like, what is the motivation for? Is it actual genuine ignorance, or do you actually just like not value us? Like, do you value us this little that you are willing to publicly say that we just like are worth nothing to you? When it comes to like the Oscars and the virtue signaling, I think people choose Israel because the world chooses Israel. Like the UN Commission, they famously condemn Israel disproportionately compared to other countries like Venezuela and China and Russia and North Korea have 0 to maybe 10 condemnations over 0 to 10 years, whereas Israel has like hundreds. It doesn't. It's just the way it's always been, like holding Israel to a higher standard than any other country. I mean, there's only one reason why that can be. It's the same with these celebrities. It's what they're told to do. It's a trend. And it all comes from one underlying root. I don't know if it's just my algorithm, but what I'm seeing is people getting really sick of it. I'm sure there are a lot of sycophants who are still very, pro Billie Eilish and her pins that are literally supporting brutal terrorism. I don't know if Billie Eilish supports terrorism, but her pin certainly does. I personally wouldn't put a pin on my jumper so publicly without knowing what it means. And I don't understand why we've got to this point in life where people are like supporting things that they don't know what it means. Like, you'll watch any video at any Palestinian protest where you say which river, which sea, and they're like, oh, I don't know. Like, how can you not know like the basics of your argument? And I think that's what it also comes down to, is like people are told to do this, like it's a trend over the last 10 years, like whatever it may be on social media, like it's a hashtag, it's a movement. They don't actually have the information. They just like have to be seen to be supporting the latest thing. Otherwise, like you're not woke. But they don't actually have the information to back it up. Like they don't have any reasons why they're supporting it. It's unfortunately the reality that we're in. It's just a shame that these people have such massive platforms and they're using their platforms in such terrible ways.
Whenever there's someone new on the stage, someone new comes into music or film, when are they going to talk about Israel, right? And what are they going to say? When is it going to be like next week? And they're going to have like a Free Palestine badge? It's a matter of time, and it never comes from a place of education. But this is what I found the most frustrating, is they do have such a big impact when it comes to talking, these little bites of information that people just absorb without even noticing that they're doing it. And then when they do come to an academic discussion or talk, even when it comes to government, right, they already have this kind of nagging sound in the back of their mind that they know that there's so many people with such loud voices with those pins and talking Free Palestine. Like I saw that in university. I actually tried that out, and it works. Like you say to them, which river, which sea, they've no idea, and they walk away because they see how stupid they are. But that's where it comes from, and they hear it from these celebrities, and when they're any subject that they approach, whether it be in university, whether it be in work, they kind of already have that voice, and it's so much harder to speak to them, right? That it goes to show how much of an impact these Hollywood stars have. And Olivia Colman, if you're watching this, please respond to Josh. You can find him at Josh Rose Writes, or you can write to us at thejewishstand.com. We'll be happy to talk to you about how your views do have an impact, especially on us here on the ground, just trying to live a day in the UK, not in Israel. And yet we're still dealing with your consequences. I think, was it Claire Foy who recently spoke out about not needing to have a political voice because she's an actress?
Exactly.
And you just think to yourself, like, that's so beautiful.
And you know what? She got such backlash from the liberal. By the way, let me say I am a liberal person with liberal values, but I am not like liberal in the way that it's been like totally, the reputation of liberals has been ruined because of these liberals who have like totally like piled on her and been like, having no opinion is like the worst thing you can ever do. Like, you have to have an opinion on Israel. You have to have an opinion on Palestine. You have to basically say free Palestine. Otherwise, like, if you go in like Beyonce's Instagram comments, it's like, why haven't you spoken about Palestine? Like, why does she need to? Like, she's from Texas. Like, she doesn't need to. Like, it's not her fight. Like, not everybody in the world has to have an opinion on Palestine. Um, and good for Claire Foy. God, if we only had more people like Claire Foy who were like, I'm not getting involved, but people who don't get involved, the liberals are like, that's worse, because then they like make up the opinion for you, and they've got some wild imaginations because they
Yeah.
love nothing more. It's like in Dave Rich's book, from the CST, he wrote a book called Everyday Hate, and he says one of the reasons why like the left, the liberals on their pro-Palestine protests, they love holding up like swastikas, like a Magen David, is because they love nothing more than like the thrill of cosplaying as a Nazi. Like, it's a thrill for them. If they can project like some like Nazi viewpoint onto you, like that's for them like the biggest thrill. It's like the biggest taboo, and it relates back to them. Like, as if you like say like I'm non-political, like that's they pretend they hate it, but they actually love it because they can be the Nazi and be like, you're a Nazi, and like project these opinions onto you, which they probably secretly have because they're the ones holding the swastikas and they get a thrill out of it. So, they do always reveal their true colours in the end.
They're the ones who graffiti as well onto Jewish student accommodations with Nazi swastikas. Not, if they're calling us the Nazis, why are they targeting Jewish institutions with the most offensive symbol? You can probably imagine. Like you said, there's a lot of pressure to speak about against Israel. These are on actors and actresses and singers. Just anything in popular culture today has this inherent pressure to be political, and you can think about it. It's often easy to blame, overt anti-Israel Arabic countries like Iran and Qatar, who we're hearing more and more. I think as MI5 recently talked about influence in universities, you can definitely see that influence being brought out. But we also often overlook the comments and actions of fringe minority of Jews. So these are usually secular or religious Jews. And they also claim to be speaking for Jewish values. How do you respond to those groups? Because they also have a big impact.
It is never a mainstream Jewish voice. It is always a fringe voice. It's the Naturi Carter, it's Hannah Einbinder, it's Alana Glazer, it's somebody who is an as a Jew who they have to say as a Jew because you wouldn't know that they were Jewish based on their words and action. You can't prescribe like what is the right and wrong way of being Jewish. Like, we are a small family, but a family, and there's different ways of people living within that family. But I think that if you are not within the community, you don't get to speak on behalf of the community, certainly not publicly, and certainly not in alignment with people who are actively trying to take away from the community or commit violence against the community. If the mayor of New York is stripping away rights of Jewish people on day one of his time in office, and he's befriending people like Hannah Einbinder and Ben Platt and Lana Glazer, those are not mainstream Jews. Like, they do not represent New York Jews in the mainstream. Like, that's just a fact. So they can talk about how like their Jewish experience. Ben Platt can sing his lovely little Rosh Hashanah song or whatever he sings on TV, but he's not sending his children to Jewish schools, and he's not walking to the synagogue where these people are outside chanting their support for Hamas, and they since Mamdani got elected are chanting, "We support Hamas." They're saying the quiet part out loud now. And that's in part because of these fringe Jews who are being like, well, we support Mamdani, we support these people, their right to protest outside a synagogue. Well, no, if you want to protest Israel, protest outside the Israeli embassy. Like, why are you bringing it to a synagogue? And these Jews are, they're definitely, they're doing a lot of harm to the Jewish community by aligning themselves with these people. I would love to sit down at the Shabbos table of the Platt family. Shout out to Jonah Platt, by the way, who does amazing things. He's such great things for the Jewish people. And by the way, Ben Platt, the gay one of the family, who I used to loved him in Dear Evan Hansen, loved his music, he's got great albums, and he was like the Platt brother that I loved as a gay Jew. And over the years, he has done nothing but disappoint me at every point. Onaheg has come out of the blue for me and been like the Jewish savior. What do they talk about on Rosh Hashanah or Shabbos dinner? Because the way that those two have gone, Hannah Einbinder. I mean, I don't think she has Shabbos dinner or Rosh Hashanah dinner because surely not. She surely isn't having these Jewish moments. But then I also think that there's a conversation there about like American versus British Judaism, because I've got some American Jewish friends who say to me like, well, in New York it is different, like it is just different, and then like that's a whole conversation that I'm like maybe not an expert in. I go to Friday night sometimes, but I'm not like a religious person. But they're never like community-based Jews who are living in the community. They're never subject to the attacks of the pro-Palestinians or the anti-Semites. So why they feel they can talk on behalf of us, I do not know.
Yeah, it's definitely a different discussion of what's going on in America, especially when I think was it in the Mamdani election. Something like 40% of the UK the New York Jews voted for him. It was a very large group, and that's already more than just a fringe minority. But here in the UK, it definitely feels like that, and it's definitely a testament to seeing how the Jewish community has united over this issue. Right, you have Orthodox rabbis and you have Reform rabbis who usually at it, obviously in a very civilized manner, but they usually don't see eye to eye in most of the religious things. And all of a sudden, when it comes to Israel, there's no boundaries. There's only Jew, right? There's if you're with us or not, and you could be anything under that umbrella. You can be whoever denomination or non you want, but there is sort of this umbrella of British Jews who have united over this topic that we care about. The anti-Semitism on the streets and supporting the hostages and wanting justice in the world and peace. That's we pray for that 3 times a day. It's not a controversial thing to say. Yet you still find the minority, those fringe people who somehow are able to talk against what the majority of the British Jews are talking about. And I'm sure you can find it in most topics, right? You can always find the conspiracy theorists among the academic universities and the person the outlier, if it serves your purpose, right? Which is, I guess, the deeper point. But they do have a lot of impact, and it's definitely something to be talking about. Are we making a big deal out of this? Are we talking about it a bit too much? You mentioned before about a statistic that the excellent Duff Foreman he brought in about 50% less Holocaust Memorial Days. And we also, if I could just bring it out more, most of the social media posts you see today about the Holocaust Memorial Day will not mention the word Jew. But are we still making a big fuss over our narrative? Should we be focusing on other minorities still and their voices?
Holocaust Memorial Day, I think we should be focusing on the Holocaust. I think there are other days where we commemorate other genocides. I don't know why in the last few years it's become like Holocaust Memorial Day and other genocides. It seems to have been like attached, and I don't understand why that's the case. Particularly now when like the BBC, for example, failed to mention the word Jew like every single time it mentioned Holocaust Memorial Day over the day a couple of weeks ago, and then of course had to do a apology. I mean, not a day goes by without the BBC having to apologise to the Jewish community. And then like when the Green Party didn't mention Jewish people in their social media post about Holocaust Memorial Day. So I don't think we're making a big enough deal about that. I think we need to continue. I think we need to pick our battles, certainly, but the rhetoric online, particularly about the Holocaust, in the past year I've seen has been really frightening. Like people are just not believing it anymore, or being like, we're being lied to, or like it wasn't 6 million, or like there were other things, other bigger Holocausts, or just like either just like total lies, or just like saying like, why are we focusing on this, or whatever it may be. So I think we should definitely be making a deal, especially as we're like losing the last generation of Holocaust survivors. I don't think as Jews we ever like hijack other days in the way that our days are always hijacked, and I think we are always held to this insane standard where we have to like be such like menschers and be like, oh no, yeah, you can come to our party, but we're never invited to their party, and we like it seems like to always be the case. But we can't talk about that because then we can't always be the victims. But then if we fight back, then we're the aggressors. So it's like you can't win. But yeah, like Dov said, like half of schools aren't commemorating it. They're not commemorating it because they don't want to offend any parents post October 7th. Now that is like the key like topic, that's the key reason, and that needs to be addressed because how can addressing the Holocaust be offensive to anybody, particularly in any relation to October 7th? And if that's offensive to you, then we need to unpack why. Yeah, I think that is more like what says more about what's happening to British society. Um, there's just like an epidemic of like weak leadership in schools if that's the case. Like if I was a head teacher and a parent was like, "Oh, I don't want to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day because that's offensive to me because of October 7th," I would be like, "Well, too bad. Like those two things are not related. Get a grip." But we have weak teachers, we had that Jewish MP who had to visit a school in Bristol in secret because his original trip it had to be cancelled because of his affiliation with, I think, Labour Friends of Israel or something. Again, it's just weak. There's just weak leadership in schools, in the police. We've seen with the West Midlands Police. There's weak leadership in our government, as we know. I just feel like we need to go back to no, go back to a time like I'm only 33, but like I just feel like where are the leaders? Like why are we letting people make these terrible decisions um where people are allowed to get away with things like this? Like no, you don't get to opt out of Holocaust Memorial Day because it makes you uncomfortable because of Israel. No, that's not a thing. Like your kids are going to learn about the Holocaust because it's an important part of history. Because I can't say, no, my kids aren't gonna not learn about this persecution because it makes me like, no, like I could never say that, and nor would I, because that's an insane thing to say. But like, why are we always the ones who are like expected to roll over and be like, oh yeah, no, you can't learn about our mass genocide if it makes you uncomfortable. That's totally fine. Like, no, that's not a thing. It's like that Super Bowl advert, with that like little nebby Jewish boy. Ugh, no, we are not Jews with trembling knees. We are not these weak little Jews anymore. Like we are
Yeah, don't get me
not.
started on that one.
Yeah, we're not these eternal victims. Like we need to start standing up for ourselves and being like, no, like this is not okay. We need strong people, strong leadership, strong decision makers, and to be like, no, you are learning about the Holocaust because it was an important part of history. Things are starting to repeat themselves. We are not going to die by the millions again just because it makes you uncomfortable to learn about our history. No, sorry, no, I'm not. That's just not going to happen. And I'm starting to speak up a lot more because I used to be a bit like, less confident, but I don't care about making people uncomfortable anymore um, because it's just we tiptoe so much around these topics, but like we're expected to roll over all the time. So no, to answer your original question, we are not making a big enough deal about the fact that Holocaust Memorial Day is just not being commemorated in the way that it was. The fact that the BBC, of course, isn't mentioning Jews, that the Green Party isn't mentioning Jews, that people are talking about other genocides on Holocaust Memorial Day. Like, let us have our one day where we talk about the 6 million Jews that were murdered, that were ethnically cleansed in a genocide. That word is thrown around all the time now, totally lost its meaning, but in its actual definition of what a genocide is, to ethnically cleanse, to wipe off a specific ethnicity of people, let us have that day. And Jewish people, if you're listening, stand up for yourselves, call out weak leadership, go for leadership positions, and be strong leaders, because that is the only way that things are actually going to change. Because the way this country and this world is going with these weak leaders, I don't know what the alternative is going to be.
I wish I could have ended on that note, because that's such a powerful statement. It's like I was seeing a Reddit post, and there was one of these posts about show some harrowing photos or something. All these things that people are obsessed about, and then you see a lot of pictures of the slave trade from Africa into the US, and these are terrible pictures. And you see a lot of gender-based violence and things that are really terrible from every country, and then you have people who post about Auschwitz and Dachau. A lot of the pictures of the slave trade, you can tell immediately who the victim is. You can tell it's the people from Africa, based on the color of the skin. You can tell the gender-based violence, but you can never tell the Jews from the pictures, because we look the same as everyone else. We look like a white person from Germany or everything. So it's if you don't distinguish that it was Jews who were murdered, you completely erase our suffering, right? And that's an important topic to make, which is exactly what's also going on in Israel, right? It's like there's violence in the Middle East. Which violence? Who was raped on 7th of October? Who was murdered? What was that attack about? Name the victims, right? And it is tough because we are starting to stand up for ourselves now, right? We've realized that our friends are not really the friends that we wanted to. I always say that we should learn from the heroes of the 7th of October, and that's the Israeli soldiers, the Israeli civilians who rushed to the front lines, right? Dropped everything, ran there. And also the soldiers every day fighting, and they're not scared if they get shot at, right? And they're not scared of that. So how much more so today we can sit in our warm offices and talk to Joe down the cubicle and say, let's talk about Judaism because you've said something that is actually quite offensive. We shouldn't really be scared of that, right? That's a good lesson to learn from. Let's go on to the next topic. You mentioned briefly that you are making Aliyah very soon, actually, and it's an exciting time for you. It's a huge new step in your journey, and you've made a bold choice, Josh, if I can say it. You staking your future in a tiny country of 10 million people who've just come out of a 7-front war and seem to have won, most of them. So, based on that, what are your thoughts on the future of Judaism, I guess, and our place in the world, you moving to Israel, especially as today, we're taking the Jew boxes in the equality and diversity and inclusion forms. It seems to be a detriment to job security. Is that something we all have to do? Do we all have to move to Israel?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I don't know. It's scary. It's like, oh, I'm so glad I'm moving to Israel because, like, yeah, there's comments online or, like, even when I called up O2 and was like, I want to keep my phone number. I'm moving countries. And they're like, where are you moving to? And I'm like, Israel. And I'm like, are they going to give me a bad deal because, like, they want to, like, punish me? Like, it's these things where I'm like, I don't have to worry about that once I'm in Israel. Being in the UK, it's still like, well, like when I got my haircut in London, and I was like, this is my last haircut. I'm never going to see you again, because I've had the same guy for like 8 years. He was like, oh, where are you going? I'm like, I'm moving to Israel. Like I told him, I felt safe enough to tell him, but and then as I said it, I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that because what if he gives me a really bad haircut or like he has scissors next to my neck? It's those things that like people should probably worry about. Like it is a thing. It's getting to the point like. I do think that like the golden age, quote unquote, of anti-Semitism or lack of anti-Semitism in the UK is over. We of course are protected by law. Somebody cannot say to you like, I'm not going to give you a job because you're Jewish, but like they can definitely do that in other ways and make your life difficult because of that. And I think that's definitely become worse in the past 2 years. I always found it much easier to tell people that I was gay than Jewish because you don't get any backlash of being gay, but you definitely get backlash of being Jewish. And this is pre-October 7th. This is like 3 years ago. I just see things online where I'm like, oh, like there's just so many things happening every day. I mean, you doom scrolling on Instagram, and you're like, God, like it's just gonna get worse and worse. Like I'm not on that negative. I'm like, yeah, like I don't. This is why I'm leaving. I'm like, I don't see, and it can be like from the minor things. I can't think of an example right now. I'm sure I could look at my phone and see one in 2 seconds of being like, this is why I cannot live in America or the UK. To like big things where it's like, the police just foiled what would have been the biggest terror attack in UK history, which was targeting Jewish schools in Manchester and Jewish community centres in Manchester. That would have been the biggest terror attack in UK history, not just for Jewish people, but like for the entire country. And they were targeting the schools that like I went to and that my friends' kids go to. Why would I want to stay and wait for Keir Starmer to talk about how bad anti-Semitism is? Like after all my friends and family have been killed, like that, and that could still happen. By the way, like I'm leaving, they're staying, so like that is really scary and whatever. But on a positive note, like the future of Judaism, like I think Israel is definitely securing itself like in an independent way, like it's less reliant on America, because God knows what's going to happen in the next election. It's securing it's like its defense systems more, and it's becoming a lot more self-reliant. So that's great. I'm moving for a lot of reasons. Like obviously negatively, the UK I think is like currently like on a downward spiral in terms of safety for Jewish people, and I think non-Jewish people too, like it doesn't ever end with the Jews. There's some positive reasons why I'm moving, like gay reasons, like the thing that obviously the gay community in Tel Aviv is thriving, but also like being around Israelis, like you said, like these are people who are just like inherently so strong and brave. And it might be a bit patronizing to say that, like that there is a lot of like suffering and like PTSD, and like we cannot gloss over that. I walk past UCL every day to go to work, and these like Nebi students in their kefirs who are like chanting for Palestine but are like offended by their own shadows. Like, why do I want to be around that energy when I can be around like literal like survivors of war and like try and like soak up that and be like, this is strength. Like, we are 80 years on from the Holocaust. We are really like so much stronger than we used to be. And I want to be around that. Like, that is the future of Judaism. I would like to think that the world is waking up. I think, like, with the Venezuela situation and a lot of, like, the liberal left, like, protesting to free the Venezuelan dictator, I think a lot of Venezuelans were like, no, like, that's not what we want. I had some Venezuelans, like, message me being like, yeah, that was like a wake up call for me to be like, oh, that I don't support this like left liberal, extreme version of left liberalism anymore. So like, hopefully, as more extreme things happen, maybe people will start to wake up. I don't know, but like I say, I'm not sticking around to wait and see, because as more extreme things happen, that usually means, you know, Jews dying. I'm not going to be one of them, hopefully. Please God, you know, that doesn't happen. You know, under this terrible government, who knows what could happen if they keep welcoming in people who literally put on Twitter that they want to kill us. Sorry, I'm going to try and be positive and end positively, but I think Jewish people have been around. We have been here for 3,000 years. We're not going anywhere. We are a small family and we are strong. Everything about Judaism is joyful, even in the sadness, like, even in things like grief. Like, we just do it so well. We support each other. We feel things so intensely. There's a reason why we contribute so much to things like Hollywood and storytelling and music and like science and Nobel prizes, because we feel things and we contribute so positively. And what a joy to be part of that small tribe. Like, the biggest joy of my life to be part of it. I would not give it up for the world. I know that we are the eternal victims, even though, you know, we can be strong, yet we're still a victim. I wouldn't give up for anything, and I think the future of Judaism is bright. We are not going anywhere. People, I think, are gonna wake up and realize like how much they have been ignorant or like misinformed, hopefully. There'll always be haters, you know, as bad as from day one, when Judaism was, when we were handed the Torah on Mount Sinai. This sounds, I'm not religious, but this sounds religious. You know, we've always had people against us. We always will, but I have no doubt that we will always thrive and continue thriving.
That's an excellent message to end on, especially to our audience. You know, the young Jewish, British, American, around the world, even in Israel. You know, the world has always been against us, but we can always continue to thrive. We've got a lot good going for us, right?
We defy the odds. We should not be here, but we are still here. There's a reason why.
Absolutely. Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to read Josh's stuff on our website, TJS and his Instagram @JoshRoseWrites. Again, Josh, thank you so much for your time today. Don't forget to subscribe to or follow our YouTube and Spotify, and I will see you in our next podcast. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.